I am sleep deprived, and God bless all of you who have to deal with me today. Quick roll call. Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Ms. Pacell.
Here.
Mr. Naples.
Here.
Mr. Skoukis.
Here.
All right, we got a full group today. Please stand for a moment of silence and the pledge of allegiance, please. Okay, I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have a motion, please, to consider approving the agenda of our previous meeting. Excuse me, approving the agenda for this meeting. My apologies.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all opposed, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 5-0. Do any public comment for the agenda items? No one's in the audience. Anybody online? Anything previous? Okay, so there's no public account. Okay, may I have a motion, please, to consider approving the minutes from the April 2022 meeting?
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Move on to reports. Monthly report from April 22. Mr. Lafayette, you have the floor, sir.
To date, revenues are ahead of April of 2021 by approximately 578,000, and expenses are up 52,000 for a net increase of approximately 525,000. Real estate taxes are up 641,000 in comparison to 2021. This had a little bit to do with our real estate bills going out earlier, and as well as us sending more collectibles out just because of the increase in assessment. As of the end of April, there's still 313,000 left to collect in general fund taxes compared to 366 in 2021. So we're right on track. If you add what we've already collected, the 5.8 million with the 313,000 that's still outstanding, we lean about 50 to 60,000 every single year. We're right on budget. We're projecting to be right on budget. Extremely close, we're within $1,100 of where we were budgeting if you take those into account. So moving on to our other taxes. 1 second. Other taxes are showing a large decrease of 350,000. LST is contributing a very slight decrease of about 8,000. But the large one-time transfers of the mainline health building in March of 2020 is the real reason for the big discrepancy there. License fines and rents are showing an increase of 61,000. This is also similar to the tax bills. Bills went out earlier in 2022 than 2021, so there was just more time to collect. In addition, we did some cleanup this year and sent a few more bills out. Also, we received our cable franchise fee payment earlier in 2022 than 2021. If you take the cable franchise fee, that accounts for about 70% of the increase in this budgeted item. Interest remains down just due to COVID rates. State and local government are showing a decrease of about 35,000. This is due to the fact that the recycling grant was received earlier in 2021 than 2022. Other finances saw an increase as well. This is due to two things. The first is insurance claims. This is the money that we got back from insurance, that it's a one-time revenue source. We don't budget for it because we're really not hoping to file things through insurance, but it happens. In addition, the township sold about $30,000 in assets, mostly old public works and police vehicles. Charges for service saw an increase of about 12,500. This is an increase of zoning fees and land development fees. Lastly, on the revenue side, public safety is experiencing an increase of about 192,000, and this is directly related with permit revenue being up, mostly associated with the continued build out of the Ellis Preserve. So moving on to the expense sides,
Can we stay with revenue for just a second?
Sure.
I was thinking about the LST and specifically, I know we have a third-party vendor. Thinking about the status of work at home versus in office for SAP, for AmeriHealth, for the large health complex. Are we comfortable that the reporting is sound, or do we have any concerns?
So LST it's difficult to reconcile out because what we have to go by is the third party and our business license. Every quarter, the LST collection Keystone sends us a quarterly report and we try our best to reconcile. One of the difficulties is that when these third parties have payroll companies that are located somewhere else,
Yeah.
sometimes their business license we can't really match. But we do our best to go back and reconcile our LST and make sure that we're collecting from at least the people that we have business license for.
Mhm.
So it is an ongoing project, I would call it.
Yeah, I'm sure we're not unique. I'm sure Keystone is wrestling with this with all of their other municipalities that they represent.
The answer has been that, and there has been some people that have actually challenged this, but for folks that have earned income tax. But the LST, most businesses are just collecting and paying, even if the employee is not showing up to work in that locality. They're just doing it. But what we don't know and what we haven't been able to quite figure out yet is like, particularly like with AmeriHealth, because they're supposed to have 1,200 employees here in town.
Right.
And right now they have 300. So have they ever moved those folks over to us, or are they still showing up wherever they are before they move
Prior
here
location, right.
prior to that? But most of the other places are just going ahead and just paying the tax because they didn't change it. Nobody gets too upset about $1 a week.
Yeah.
It's the EIT that most people are challenging and saying, I shouldn't be paying EIT in a community that I'm not really working in if they don't have EIT in their community they live in. And so that's where I've heard the biggest challenge related to that.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions on the revenue side, I just wanted to point out the two big categories that have discrepancies on the expenses. The first is going to be benefits. You can see that that's down 236,000. This is, if everybody recalls, our pension MMOs are way down compared to 2021 just because of our funding levels above 100%. We dropped our assumed interest rate. It's down, so our MMO minimum municipal obligations, for those who don't know, sorry. It's the township's contribution to our pension funds. Those are that is the primary reason that's going to be down. Pretty much, it's going to be down the entire year because it's an annual payment that we got. And on the other side, capital, you'll see an increase of about 80,000. If you take into account the additional 50,000 that the township budgeted for the road program and the additional 25,000, the budget that was budgeted for the vehicle replacement program, that makes up $75,000 of the $80,000 increase in capital that you're going to see this year. I'm sorry, not this year, for the month of April. And other than that, if anybody had any other questions, those were just the two big categories I wanted to touch on the expense side.
The issue that I've noticed being talked about as it relates to municipalities and workforce involves the pension obligation with the double-headed monster of the continuing low interest rates, although creeping up, but the built-in cost of living adjustments, and now with those cost of living adjustments accelerating dramatically, it's putting even more pressure on plans. I know we've talked about our plan being effectively fully funded, but thinking and looking out from a forecast perspective, are we still comfortable that we're in good shape in this environment?
So the best way to answer that, the good news, bad news, depending on which side of the pension plan you sit on. The good news from the non-uniform plan is we have no cost of living adjustments in the non-uniform plan. And so that, if we take that, I'm not concerned about that, other than the fact that the market itself is so far down that obviously,
Yeah, your investment income.
because we're doing our evaluation based on market base, and we don't have any smoothing that we're doing currently, we're gonna take a pretty big hit unless something drastically changes between now and the end of the year. So I anticipate a pretty strong impact going into 2024.
Yes.
Unless something, like I said, really changes.
Market turnaround.
Market turnaround. The police pension, there is a cap as well. And so what it is doing is it's accelerating the police pension has a built-in, well, I won't say built-in, but like as the cost of living
An escalator?
escalates,
Mhm.
they can go up front. When they retire at 50% of their salary. And there is a cap to 80%. The concern that I have with what the market's doing right now with cost of living is it's actually driving that number. Typically, we've been used to like a 3% or so type of increase.
Yeah.
Obviously, the last 2 years, that number is great, much higher. And if that continues, we're going to get to that 80% more quickly, which
And they're
will
not
have an
dying.
impact. But the good news is there is a cap.
Okay.
And when it hit the 80% of what you left at, you're done. That's when it stops. And so, it is a concern because we're going to end up, we already know at least 2 officers are retiring next year, probably 2 more the year after that, and 2 more the year after that. And so we haven't had retirees real recently. And so this could have a pretty big impact on the pension plan. So if they retire and the cost of living continues, they're going to move to their 80% much more quickly, is what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I mean, the pension plan was designed for them to retire. When we think they are, where the impact will be is how quickly they get to that 80%.
Thank you.
And if nobody had any other questions on the expenses, that would conclude the monthly reports.
You're on. Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Wait and see if there's any other questions.
All right, let's dive into the new business. 2021 year-end recap, DCAD.
Sure. So I believe at the last meeting, we discussed that we filed the DCD report before the April 1st deadline. The elected auditors met with the appointed auditors and they were comfortable with us filing, but I don't think we ever really recapped what the year-end numbers here. So we thought it would be a good idea to bring them up. So overall in 2021, the general fund finished with 20.2 million in revenue and 20.7 in expense for a net decrease of 483,000. So with that being said, if these numbers sound unusually high, you're correct. Newtown usually passes a budget somewhere in the $10 million range. But due to a refinancing that happened late in 2021, we needed to record an $8.7 million expense because we paid the bond off and an $8.7 million revenue. So it kind of just inflates both sides. So if you take that 8.7 million out, we're back to where we need to be budget wise. I also wanted to say, as I just said, there's a $483,000 net decrease. What this doesn't take into account is the $1.6 million transfer the board approved that represented excess revenue in 2020 that was rolled into the capital fund. So because that is an expense on the general fund side and a revenue on the capital fund, you're actually showing a $1.6 million expense in the general fund. So taking that $1.6 million expense transfer out, we're really back to the black of about $1.1 million in 2021. Sorry. Thinking about the 2023 budget, 2021 audits, it's difficult from year. Did that make sense to everybody? I know that's kind of confusing, that is showing a deficit, but there's really a $1.6 million transfer. So what made up the 1.1 that we actually had excess revenue? There's two major factors. The one is our transfer tax. Transfer tax came in budget $900,000 over. This was the two things that I've been reporting every month. The first is we had two large transfers. One of the Ave apartments, I'm not exactly sure what they're called at the moment. They changed names so many times. And the second is the Mainline Health Building. Also, as we all know, the real estate market was odd in 2021, more transfers for more money, which means more transfer tax. So like I said, that came in $900,000 over what we budgeted. The second factor was permit revenue. We budgeted about 1.3 million for permit revenue. We brought in about 1.7. This was just due to some one-time permits that were pulled in 2021 that we weren't anticipating. And if you add those two numbers together, we're very, very close to our 1.1 million number. I would also like to make note that we collected all but $57,000 in real estate tax, which is the equivalent to our wonderful 99% collection rate that we collect every year. So those are the three driving factors on the revenue side. Overall, 2021 expenses stayed within budget. If not under budget. There were no really huge areas of savings, but overall, some departments saw some savings in, building costs, recycling costs associated with leaf collection. Overall, gasoline expenses were down. So overall, we stayed within our operating expenses and exceeded our revenues. And ended the year in a very positive favor. And if anybody had any questions about that, I'd be happy to field them. That is kind of where we ended in a 10,000 foot view.
How many years now is it that the permit revenue has exceeded the cost of operating that department? We discussed this last year. Hopefully this next year we can match so that the people paying permit fees aren't subsidizing other parts of township business.
So
How many years? That's the first question.
the first
How
part
many years?
is probably about 6.
Okay.
And so the second part of that question, the part of that answer, is the reminder that we really budget typically expectations of what the permits will be in a normal year. And then we have these, and I think we had this conversation last year when we went through this, that the idea is that we know if we take out the Equus project and take it off of the books, we're probably right at about $400,000 or $600,000 worth of permits. And that is what we try to, that's what we know it takes to run the department without the extra, the third parties that we bring in to help do the Equus piece or cover for us in other areas while our department's doing the Equus piece. We know that's going away. And when that goes away, we should be right on target. And that's always been our kind of goal that we were trying to lead towards. And if there is extra at this point that comes in, those dollars are being used really to help set us up so that the long-term part that where we get to in the budget, we have dollars in place to be on an ongoing basis, be prepared to cover public works costs and things that are going up because of this growth. And that's how we've been doing that.
Well, that didn't answer the question for this year.
Well, I think what Steve is saying, kind of put it into his digest version, if you take the permits, you put them into two buckets. One is the ongoing, continuing normal. The other bucket is the one-time extraordinary. And what I think.
Which we
Steve
have
said-
every year.
Well.
Well, we do because
We
of-
do, but we know that that's gonna go away.
When? That was the question.
Well, you tell me when they stop, you know, I mean, we
That's-
think it's another year. You know, COVID, the way it happened, we thought they would actually be done by now. They're slower behind. I mean, I don't have 100%. It's a crystal ball that I don't have, and that's part of the challenge.
Well, they're gonna be building over there for at least 2 or 3 more years, because they.
But the permits will stop.
Because the permitting, because the
Permits always
is well
in
before.
front, and we'll have continuing costs going on beyond that. So like, for example, they came in and pulled a permit for the apartments last year. Our costs are actually happening this year and next year
Yeah,
while we do all the inspections, while we're doing everything related to that. So you see the revenue, we're gonna have expenses greater at some point anticipated than what the revenues are, because you pull the permit now on a project that takes 2 years to build. And like, for example, I think the apartments was pulled at the end of 20.
Yes, that sounds about
So
right.
when the apartments was pulled at the end of 20, they're not talking about being done until the end of 22, but our revenue showed in 20.
so when they finished, I guess the apartments, then is the last retail that has to be built out. correct?
Well, they've got an office building they're getting ready to come in
Okay.
and do. They're going to do a hotel. They're going to do
Catering.
the catering.
Yeah.
And then they also have probably, I'm going to say 10 to 20 type retail / restaurants that are going in that area.
Okay.
So, but I've been told, and I'm waiting to see, you know, 1 year I was told that wasn't going to happen until 2023. Now I'm being told that probably all the permits will be pulled in 2022.
Okay.
And so, you know, when we first went in and budgeted for 2022, we actually didn't think that there was going to be anything pulled in 2022 based on what we knew. Now we're being told that everything may be pulled in 2022 with the idea that they'll finish building out in 2025. And so I don't know that yet. I'm waiting.
Sure.
You know, that it's not, the challenge that we have is that, and the other piece that when we talked about this last time, that if we go back, we've looked at history, we know that somewhere between 400 and 600,000 is probably the right number that we will have on a normal year in Newtown Square. And that's what when we looked at that past before this blip happened. And then once that goes, the question has always been, and we haven't raised permit fees. We haven't changed permit fees at all in the process. And so if when all that goes back, we believe we can manage to the department where it is. And we'll get rid of our third parties and it'll all be just in-house and it should work properly. The piece that's been the thing that's been the question is, because I have this blip that happens with related to, and I get you, it's been a longer blip than we anticipated, but because of that, do I drop the fees for everybody who's doing the same project today on their house, who's going to do it 5 years from now, and they're going to pay this greater amount because the corporation has subsidized the amount of the person who's doing it today? That became the question. Because the person who's paying today is paying the exact same fee, because we haven't changed the fees at all. The only thing we've changed in the fees since I've been here, I think for permits, is that we now charge upfront $100 for a review fee, because people were dropping off permits, and we would have at the end of the year 60 permits that never got picked up. And so we charge the review fee. You pay the $100 upfront for the review fee, and then if your permit's $200, you come in and you pay the difference of another $100. So, I mean, that's the only thing we've changed, but the cost today to do it is the same cost it was before for the average homeowner.
Look, so to operate the townships, like police department, roads department, all that's paid for by taxes by everybody, the businesses, the ongoing stuff. So the permit fees that come in should only be used by the permit department. So for 6 years now, we've had an excess in revenue of permit fees, right? Has that money at least been reserved to continue to be used by the permit department for some number of years? Or did it get used to build out roads and plant trees and all that kind of stuff? This where you keep saying it's a 1 year thing, or maybe one more year, maybe 2 years. I get it, but that money, that excess money that's coming in from permits, we should have it in a separate account reserved, right? For that department to use. And then it can trickle out for many number of years afterwards. You said, for instance, that your work is ongoing with people pay the permit and then the work is ongoing. So, right, you're careful with that money to keep it segregated for the purpose of the permit department. Yes?
I would say, I mean, no, we have not watched it that closely. We're
Why not?
aware of it, but we have not watched it that closely.
I don't think there's a requirement to do that.
No, there's
unless
not,
I'm
but it
correct.
seems grossly unfair to have this permit department be sort of a revenue generating department for the rest of the town. And if it was a 1 year or 2 year thing, I would say, okay, I get it, there's a blip, but it's sort of, when you have a corporation that constantly has one-time charges, after a while you start to think, oh, okay, this is the new normal now, until it's not, it would seem if you had kept the money for the revenue department segregated, right, then that would then impact how much you charge in fees down the road, and we could keep using it. But I'm not saying anyone's doing anything illegal or wrong. That's clearly not the case. But it just seems somehow not right to foist on us taxpayers, those of us that my permit fees that I paid are going to roads and crap, and that upsets me.
So you think there should be a match of, as close as we can, what residents pay and what residents pay and what we do to serve the residents paying? So in other words,
Yes.
so it's almost like if it was a single P&L just for that department for residential, we should match it up as perfectly as possible, and whatever's
And I
left should be put.
would
into the
say
account.
residential wise, we probably we are really
Yeah.
close. I think where the extra comes in, when there is extra, has to do with the commercial build out. And that is,
Or you could look at it the other way and say the commercial building is paying for the department and the residents are, where is the extra money
I
going?
would
in
say
other
that the
words?
commercial people may be paying, and the residential people are the ones who are benefiting in the long term.
Or suffering.
Well,
I mean, I don't
Why are
know.
they suffering?
if the commercial people are paying for the operation of the department,
Yeah,
then the residential folks, where's their money going?
it's contributing to that, but the commercial people percentage wise are paying a lot more because their permits cost more because they're building more. But as Steve said, the resident, when he puts the new bathroom in, he's paying his $200 fee. And that's probably covering the cost of his inspection. So if anything, if there is a surplus and it's going to pay for a road, the resident is benefiting for that. In the future, you're gonna have to figure this out, which is what Steve's concerned about. When this little bit of surplus goes away, then operate and pay for the roads. The permit people will still pay for the permit department in theory, but some of the surplus, which may be used for other township expenses, will go away.
So
But
I'm sorry.
the revenue will go away, the expense won't go away.
So the question, I think that pops out of this, for me at least, it sounds like you run this is gonna be my term, the residential permitting off of a fixed cost basis. You have your folks in there, the folks you have in place.
So the idea of what we tried to do is
Yeah.
we said, we've tried to manage the department as much as we can. Sorry, my glasses keep fogging up. We tried to manage the department the best we can in saying that our daily expenses or our yearly expenses match what we believe the normal yearly income is.
Is that residential and commercial or just residential?
Residential and normal commercial. Like,
Okay.
let's take out, I mean, we've had a 23% increase in population in 10-year period.
Yep.
There is no reason to believe, we don't have enough land to believe that that can continue, right? That is going to stop. So I say that, and sure enough, somebody's gonna go tear down the
Everybody's gonna have 5 kids.
Acme
now.
Shopping
Yeah.
Center and do something big different. But I say that, just a little tongue in cheek there. But the idea is that we all believe that this is coming to an end, and we thought actually it was coming to an end sooner than it did. But so we think it's going to come to an end. We've tried to manage the department and what we've hired and put into the department to be covered by the fees that we believe will be ongoing fees all the time. That's what we tried to do. Then we've hired third parties to come in and help offset the amount of work that we have now, because we have this, I mean, I think we're issuing 600 permits a year right now, something like that. And so we have 2 outside third parties who come in and do inspections. Plus, we have a part-timer who is driven by the number of inspections that need to be done. And so they're hours, I shouldn't have said it. I mean, so we do that. We don't necessarily spend all of that in any one given year. Obviously, we haven't. But as we go, what we know is as we start to slow back down, and I thought this year was going to be the year, but it won't be based on what I'm being told. So, but we thought that as that goes back, our department will still be able to function. We haven't brought in more people than we need. We'll lay off, if you want to say, our third parties, and then inspections will be done in-house, and we'll be able to cover what we have going forward. That was the goal. That's how we tried to manage this. And I hear what you're saying, Alex, and saying that you're trying to roughly match, and we do try to roughly match. And but we've also looked and said, is it reasonable that just in any given year, based on what happens, does that individual who does a bath in their house and it costs $300 for the permit, because there happens to be a bigger project in town this year, that project only costs $50 because there's this huge offset because of the other. And we've said, no, we want to try to keep that steady, that it's not changing every year based on what might be. And it just, that stays steady, and then we manage to that. What I will tell you is because of the growth, there, you know, I would argue some of the roads that we've done, yes, maybe we've used that, but it's because the builder has come in and we've had to go back and do the roads more quickly because the heavy trucks that have gone down. We've had to, you know, we've had to increase our services in those areas. And so the permit fees may have gone to some of those things, but it's helped us to be able to keep the town at the level that everybody's been used to having services within the township. We are going to pay more in taxes going forward. There is no question about it. There, you know, in order for us to continue to provide the service level that we want to provide, or even are going to need to provide, we've had 23, like I said, 23%. We've added 3,000 people to the town, and we're just now hiring the third of 4 police officers so that we have another police officer on each shift. And we've been trying to do that for 6 years. 6 years. And so, you know, there's significant cost increase to the town with the growth. And yes, there's taxes that come in, but the taxes don't equal what necessarily the cost of the services equals. And so there is a challenge. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just don't know how we balance everything and don't turn around and be sitting here saying, I need to be raising everybody's taxes 20% a year as our growth in demand changes that much, because I'd probably be ran out of town. So it's that balance of the two.
I hear you, Steve. It's, and I haven't had enough coffee yet or thought about it quite enough, but I will by the next meeting. But, you know, it seems that if, let's say the cost of running the department is 500,000 and you bring in $1 million in permit fees, and then you have this excess 500,000. What struck me was you said, hey, our work is ongoing. Now what happens is, let's say the next year, after this 500,000 excess, you go back to your normal level, but your work is continuing. Now you've already used the 500,000 for the department. So now, in other words, your department is going to have more work the next year to do for stuff that was paid earlier, right? But that excess was already used up. When if it had been
No.
stuck in a fund,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
you know,
And it's, I want you to understand, we do leave a certain amount of funding there to cover for what we believe the expenses are going to be. So we're not, we know what that is. Rich and I manage to that. And we kind of know that third-party expenses are going to be X over that period of time, because it's really the third-party expenses that are the extra that are over and above, right? I'm fairly flat without my third-party expenses. I know what I'm going to pay my codes director. I know what I'm paying my inspector. I know what I'm paying our administrative staff. You know, obviously we have some vehicle costs that have gone up because they're out more, those kind of things. And so we're managing to that. And that's all going there. But then the other piece that is this third-party expenses. And so we kind of know what we have to pay for those, and we're managing and we're reserving to make sure that we can cover all those expenses, if that's what you're asking.
yeah, that was kind of the question. But,
Yeah, we're doing
and
that.
then, you know, your comment about not having raised permit fees over the years, which is obviously a good thing, and I hope it continues. My concern would be that when the good times stop here and we're back at matching, or maybe we're even slightly under, that you would come back and say, well, it's about, you know, we haven't raised fees in 10 years now. We need to raise fees. Now, the immediate response from someone like me would be, well, wait a minute. What happened over that 10 years? You brought in an excess of 4 million in revenue over what the department needed. Where is that? And that could be used to offset some future increase, right? And that's sort of what I'm driving at, is keeping track of this. And
I got you.
I gotta ponder it more. Next meeting, I might put an agenda item.
That's okay. And I guess, you know, a question I have that comes off is, we don't run separate P and Ls or revenue generating departments.
As a whole, no.
Correct.
As a whole, no. So like liquid fuels, yes, there's a separate P and L.
Yeah,
I mean, that's by law, we have to, we
Yeah.
do that. But as a whole, we don't, I mean, first of all, things like public works, things like the police department would always be negative. You know, I mean, there's never enough revenue to offset those costs
Sure.
other than your tax dollars.
Mhm.
So that's the first answer. And we're not really large enough, like, because our recreation
not
is
scalable,
joint with Marple,
Mhm.
we don't, like, typically, I always ran recreation as a P&L separate when I was in Phoenixville.
Mhm.
It was his own account. I knew where the fees were. So, you know, we watched and matched that pretty closely. But codes, police, public works, administration are all considered one bucket
Yeah.
according to the state as we do business.
The difference, Jim, is of course the codes has a significant revenue compared to those other departments.
That's right. Yeah, because it's not like the cops are bringing in revenue.
Correct.
No, they don't.
Rich, one of the things I thought about with the township newsletter now in place is, without creating a monster or another monster, would there be a way to take the 2021 outcome, financial outcome, and put it into a snapshot that could be put into the township newsletter? So folks would see in general, again, without creating 50 questions about what is this and what is that. I mean, try and simplify it to the point where folks get it. Where I'm going with this is to Alex's point, is without necessarily dropping the hint, you get them comfortable with seeing how much one-time revenue is as compared to recurring revenue. So when the day comes, they will understand that there's different components. Now, if they choose to actually think about it, but at least to start the education process and to use that as a vehicle to kind of plant those seeds.
So I believe I heard two questions. The first is, can we summarize it and put it in the newsletter? The answer to that is yes, absolutely. We actually do this and put it in the newspaper right after the board adopts the final audit. So can that also be put in the newsletter? Absolutely.
Right.
The second question, I believe, is almost, this is our reoccurring expenses. This is what we collected above our reoccurring expenses. Almost, where did the money go? If I'm kind of understanding that question correctly. And the answer is yes, that has already been in the newsletter. And if we need to do that on an annual basis, I think that would be a good idea. But there was something along that article in the, I believe it was 2021 newsletter.
I'm talking the Reader's Digest version of what's going on, so folks can pick up on the trend, where this is going. So they're not going to be able to say you blindsided us when the day comes.
You're gonna say that no matter what you do.
Oh, I understand, but at least you can go back and say, oh, that was in the newsletter for the last 2 years. We talked about this.
Yes.
I don't want to prolong this discussion that much longer. I think it's fair to say, Stephen, that I had this unsorted file in my brain of things you've said in the past about this issue. And one of the tidbits that came out was, my recollection is that our building permits are in line with all the local municipalities around us.
Yes.
That we're not charging any more or any less for any of our permits than anybody else is.
We're on par kind of where they are. Everybody's different with how they
Right.
get there.
Right.
Some do it by square foot, some do it by cost, some do it by, everybody has a different method to get to that, but we're roughly in the same area. Yes.
Right. And the second piece is that the aggrieved party is someone who is trying to make money in our township. So the person that's paying $1.5 million or $500,000, I don't know what building permits are for a big building. The aggrieved party is somebody who's trying to do business in the township. And what they would sue us for is that we charge them too much based on this, the calculation that you're doing. And the likelihood is that their goal is to get in and get out and move on with their project. So I don't know what the likelihood is of somebody coming in and saying, we're suing you, you are overcharging us. We're not gonna pay. We don't give them a permit. Are they willing to sit and wait the time that it takes to go through a lawsuit for us to do that? And that's, I guess, one of the calculations we have to do was what is the risk of continuing our current fee structure?
Yeah, okay. My discussion wasn't, I didn't have any legal implications implied in what I was talking about. Oh, yeah.
All right. Moving on, anybody else? So I got a note the other day about having content for the summer newsletter. It's something that we talked about before, that we would have information provided on an ongoing basis, not just because we think we're really cool, but because the finance stuff is important to the community. And not a picture of us per se, crop to the middle, but so Rich, have you, given that we'd lean on you for that type of content for the most part, because it would be your reporting out, do we think there's anything else that we should add as a group to what Rich would be reporting on from a finance perspective that would add value? I'm comfortable with you coming out with a quarterly, it's a quarterly newsletter, right? that right?
It is
Yeah.
quarterly right now.
I'm comfortable with you coming out with a quarterly update of where things stand, kind of like you do with us here. I think that's the best way for us to be transparent. But does anybody else here have an idea of, hey, it would be great if we put in X around the newsletter content around finances? That would add to what Rich has to put in place.
I was thinking it would be good, if you don't already do this, to put in the newsletter scheduled current projects that are scheduled to be completed in the current budget year. So X miles of roads, including XYZ, stormwater work for this much, this many new vehicles, this much for the fire department, et cetera. And then separate but related is, by the way, new residents over the past 5 years are contributing this amount in taxes, new taxes to the township, and projected by the end of 2022, 2023 is this much new in excess taxes, and try to figure out how those are in the same realm, but then try to figure out how to get to these new residents are going to cause this much in new expenses for us going forward, although that's harder to do.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry, Sherry.
I think it's, and maybe it's in there and I just haven't seen it, so I apologize if it is, but like maybe the March one or the first quarter newsletter would say some of the things that this committee has worked on, maybe other committees as well, like Parks and Rec or flower. I know that's not really a township thing, but flower pots, just accomplishments that committees have done. And it might
We're
raise-
working on that, and one of the things that the board is asking for now, and I haven't gotten through to all of the committees, and this will be one that I need to get to, is the board is asking for a monthly report from each committee as to what's going on and what they're doing. And what we're trying to do is come up with a format that we're up to, I think, 9 or 10 committees now.
A lot of committees.
Huh?
It's a lot of committees.
A lot of committees.
Have you
And
thought
so-
about sending
Huh?
Have they thought about reading our minutes?
I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
monthly-
Yeah, I mean, it's not that-
Well, but
Monthly
what
is
I
in the
think they
minutes.
want is just a quick summary. I mean, they do get the minutes, but,
You know, the board can do what it wants, but to me, that sounds like it's a bunch of work being created.
That's right.
yeah, so.
I mean,
Well,
if
you
they-
can tell the board
they
that.
wanna-
Absolutely. No, I deal with this all the time with the companies I work with. You have meetings and status reports that nobody really gives a crap about.
We meet only once a month.
Yeah.
So to ask for a monthly, it's in our minutes, but
Yeah.
if they said quarterly or twice a year.
I
that would
think, I
make
think
more sense.
quarterly is probably what we're gonna land at the
Right,
end of the
yeah.
day for most of them. So, I mean, and particularly like this one, because it's, I mean, you have a monthly report in it. The report that Rich does goes back to the board after you approve it. So I'm not, your kind of report's already there. It's just coming through Rich. But if there was something specific and over, for example, what we're talking about, maybe with relate, that we're gonna talk about next, I think, is a stormwater committee update. You know, that may be something that we want to keep before the board
Yeah, so
on a kind of an updated basis of where we are.
not that we met, we discussed things and we had a good time and everybody moved
Right.
on. We talked about it the next meeting, so. So I will stop being smart. All right, so anything else to add into the quarterly newsletter that Rich could benefit from? All right. Moving on to old business, stormwater subcommittee update.
I can give the update. Hold on, let me, let me get my notes.
PowerPoint presentation.
We had a-
Soon.
We had a couple big storms.
It won't be that.
Although some were not as big as I expected them to be.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've gotten so sad in my life. I actually now have apps that I open up that tells me how much it rained the previous day or how much is raining in 6-hour increments. I mean, I really have to find another.
But
hobby.
slice and dice.
You need another hobby, huh?
Yeah, it's like,
What they call a rain gauge.
I know a lot of people do that too, right?
I took it.
Almost there, all right.
Okay, got it.
Warminster.
That was all for your
So-
benefit, Lisa, that we didn't have any pressure opening up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we did meet with the finance manager, or I don't know his exact title, but I will.
Assistant General Manager is, I believe, what his exact title was.
Thank you, Rich. Assistant General Manager of Warminster Township, which is a second-class township. We learned some really good information about how they implemented their stormwater fee, which they did through their municipal authority. A lot of it was because they have a municipal authority that was already in place, and there were some common, like the workforce could take on the projects of the stormwater fee that were associated. So it made sense for them to implement it through their municipal authority. And it seemed like, they had a resolution passed within 7 months. They were able, one of the keys that we're going to follow up on is whether we can get access to the
DVRPC,
DVRPC.
which is Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you, which has a map to show the impervious, which is held at the county level. So we're going to see if we can get access to that, because that was really a key, critical piece of critical information that they obtained that enabled them to expedite the whole assessment of what they needed and how to build their fee structure. They used a tiered system when it came to the fee structure, which made a lot of sense. And I should have, sorry, I should have summarized these notes a little better, but essentially their goal was to get down to like an equivalent unit for commercial and residential so that, everything was even across the board. So there was no like residents weren't being charged more than commercial or vice versa. So we have more work to do on this, but I think that we picked up some really good
Yeah,
information.
I think the big takeaway from it was, well, they were forced into it. I'm sorry. They were forced into it. They had significant budget deficits. There was a lot of unique issues going on. They look a lot like us, so that was one of the goals, was can we find a township that is ahead of us? They also, surprisingly, when they put this in, I was shocked. They really didn't encounter legal challenges from the 800-pound gorillas. Everybody is generally went along with it. They've got it. It seems fairly simple, fairly straightforward. They did a lot of communication, and they really didn't encounter a lot of resistance. And their fee structure kind of, in general, when we looked at our possibilities, and this was going back into the winter, it kind of fell into where we thought we would probably end up, to kind of what the funds that would be needed to generate to cover what we had projected at that point in time. Steve, I don't know, I know you've been dealing with the township solicitor. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else in terms of what Rich's input is on this so far. We're
Yeah,
clearly
Rich-
thinking fee so that everybody pays. Nobody gets a free ride.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, if you do a fee versus taxes, by doing a fee, it doesn't matter what the organization is, they would have to pay. So churches and schools and governments and everybody would be on the same page. And so that's the advantage of the fee. And so that nobody gets that, as you say, free ride, or, everybody's treated fairly in the process. The biggest thing is trying to come up with the right fee structure, I think, based on the amount of impervious that we have in each, for each home. One thing that we saw there out of this group from Warminster that I hadn't seen necessarily in other groups is that each homeowners might be different, where a lot of other municipalities that I've seen have said, like, all the homes pay the same fee. They really are doing it based on square footage of impervious coverage, and it doesn't matter. So if you happen to be in a home that has, 1,200 square feet of impervious coverage, and that's all that you have, you're probably paying a smaller fee than the home that has 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of impervious coverage, which makes sense, right? I mean, that's how it is. They were able to come up with a map from DVRPC that really helped to figure that out. If we could get that same type map, it's an easy do versus, us trying to figure out. One of the challenges that we have, we're a little bit more tree heavy here. And because we're more tree heavy, it's a little harder to tell the footprint in some areas. And so we'll just have to see how that works out. And it may be one of those things over time that, it's kind of like your property assessment. We figure out what the assessment is. We'll have an appeal process, and, we'll have to work that process through. And, it may be one of those things that if somebody says, well, you're not allowed on my property, that's fine, no problem. We'll make it high enough that you want to go have an appeal. You can come in and tell us what. I'm not saying that for sure, but I'm just giving an example of how we make sure that happens.
Real quick question. Does it make a difference if you have an 1.5 acre lot and 95% is impervious cover versus 5%?
No, they do it strictly based off of what's your impervious footprint. And I mean, and I asked this question specifically because, like, I'm in a perfect example living at Hunter's Run. Hunter's Run, our personal lots are very small. I mean, my footprint of my house plus my driveway, and then 5 feet from my house is my footprint. That's when you look at my tax parcel, that's my tax parcel. So I have a very small footprint that's almost all impervious coverage. And so if we did it on a percentage basis, folks like that would be hit, even though there's a tremendous amount of green around me, because the HOA has all the green, you know, and so we looked at that very issue. The same thing would be true like in Elicitor or, you know, some of these other communities. So it does, if we can do it based on the concept that they have, which makes pretty good sense, is it's the actual impervious coverage that you have. That's pretty consistent for everybody. And so if you happen to have a big house, even on a big piece of property, you're still paying for the amount of impervious that you have, even if you have lots of area where the water may soak up before it ever leaves your property.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, it was tiered. So for example, up to 1,000 square feet, you would pay $6. And then starting, you know, once you get to 2,000, then the rate goes up. Well, 1,000 to 2,000 would be $8. Then 2,000, sorry, let me start over. 0 to 1,000 is 6. 1,000 to 2,000 is 8. And then 2,000 to 4,000 is 10. And they really found that the majority was in the $3,000 range. And that's how they came up with
3,000
their
feet,
3,000 fee. Thank
feet,
you.
not dollars.
Square feet, 3,000 square feet. And that's how they came up with the equivalent residential unit to then apply to the commercial. Or the larger, I don't want to just say commercial, but
Yeah, larger, because it, like, for example, we would be a larger. You know, obviously, we have a big parking lot, we have a big building.
yeah, in their case, they have a big mall, so.
Well, that tier system makes a lot of sense because it, your point about the appeals, you're not going to appeal then unless you
$2.
move out of a tier.
Yeah.
It's going to really.
Well,
affect
we
you.
talked about that with a dollar below, a foot below, a foot above, you know, so you gotta think about that. Yeah.
Mm.
And does the fact that somebody, present company excluded, spent $25,000 to put in a stormwater system when they did a renovation, is that taken into account?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And in their case, no. They just say that the stormwater is a community issue overall, and they have to still address all of those community issues. So they're not taking that into account. The question is, do we take that into account? And then what does that mean for a developer who spent a ton of money doing it, you know, and yet most of our folks would say it's because of the new developers that we're having the stormwater issues we're having today. And so, you know, it's a vicious circle, right? And so, you know, I think we're going to have to really look at that and what that looks like. You know, because we could argue that the folks at Elicitor, the Toll Brothers folks have spent millions and millions of dollars on stormwater. Should that not, you know, take into account where those folks are? But if you talk to the people that live in Echo Valley, and you talk to the people that live, you know, downstream from there, they all will tell you that since that's happened, that they've had more water on their properties. That's not what's supposed to happen, right? You know, I mean, so are the systems not designed right? And we've gone back and we've looked at them, we said the systems are designed. Part of the challenge is we're having more rainfall. And the other part of it is we have MS4 requirements that have nothing to do with whether somebody has invested or not invested in stormwater on their property. We have a requirement that we reduce the amount of sedimentation in our streams. And it literally has what it comes from our roadways and those kind of things. And everybody benefits from our roadways. And so we've got kind of two different things we're trying to tackle with the same type of an approach. And so we're going to have to really look at that and make, you know, good decisions. We're in a spot that we want to try to knock this out over the next month or so, that we're back before you with, in other words, at least what a good plan is. And so that if we're going to try to implement something, and I don't know that it can be done, if we're going to try to implement something in 2023, we have a very short window to get that implemented. And the second question would be, if we decide that it is going to be a fee, it most likely is going to require it go to an authority. The question is, does our current authority take on and do both SOAR and storm SOAR? Or do we set up a, because I want another meeting to go
Don't
to.
say, don't say it.
Do we set up another authority that we need to manage? You know, I mean, so it's, you know, there's some questions there. And there's a lot happening, you know, as you know, John, on the municipal side for the municipal authority, what it's doing now. To add to that, is that too much? And, you know, are we actually going to have to hire some staff to actually start doing these things versus what we're doing now, where Rich and I are serving as manager and finance people for these committees or these for the authority? It may be just too much. It may be that we have to make a decision that we actually need an operating manager. We actually need their own set of finance folks, because if it starts getting that big, it's going to be a pretty big thing. And it may be that we say we share space. We use the office space we have and we don't add, you know, we're not going to add an additional cost of another building, but we still are adding cost of additional staff.
How much revenue were they pulling in? I mean, with the fee?
In Warminster?
Yeah.
Now, Warminster, just so you know, we have about 5,000 parcels, a little over 5,500. They're about 11,000. They're about twice as much as we are. I think it was 6 million.
So they had, I don't know the answer to that. I know that they structured it, they had to borrow $6 million to actually buy the infrastructure off the township, and they pretty much structured their fees just to pay that debt service. What they
Yeah,
actually,
so it probably wasn't 6 million, probably about 20, it was probably about 2.5 million a year, if I go back, now that Rich said.
Okay. And the 2.5 million a year was enough to cover the projects that they wanted to do
And the
to.
debt service.
It was to cover the debt service, which was roughly about 500,000 for them, if I remember right, and then just start building up what they need to do project wise. I don't know that their projects are equal to ours. We'd have to look at that. We know today, without going any further, we're right at about what, 20 million?
Yes.
So we know we need about 20 million today. And so what does that look like? And that's not understanding what the impacts are in a couple places that are real significant.
Okay. Thank
and
you.
I would
Yeah,
like
so
to
more
report
to
that
be done.
I have started the search for the map at the DVR PC. I have struck out as of now, but we are, I'm spearheading it from the context I have on the finance side, and I actually brought George in to try to get some contacts from his side. So we're trying to get there.
Sounds good.
Well, good
It
work
was
to
a
the
good
subcommittee. Guys, good
Yeah,
job.
that's
I
it's
mean,
above and beyond. Well, let's make it more riveting. Let's talk about the Marple Newtown Leisure Service payment issue. So since we last met, Rich and Stephen provided information that identified the fact that Marple Township was roughly in arrears of $250,000 over a recent timeframe, including zero payments in some years. So armed with this information, I decided to attend the last supervisors meeting at the recommendation of Mr. Neese to inform the supervisors of this issue. I think I was quite deliberate and direct with my information without a lot of editorial comment. I think I was pretty good about that. You know, my editorial comment included in this meeting is that it's absolutely ridiculous that these guys think that they can get away with not paying $250,000 and not acting like it's no big deal not paying the money. So I provided that information to the supervisors. The supervisors took it under advisement. There was a spirited discussion among certain supervisors, some of whom thought that we shouldn't worry about the past and just look to the future, and some of whom said that it was absolutely ridiculous not to pay attention to the past and to handle both the past and the future. So I offered my time to meet with the people from Marple Township. That was taken under consideration. and I'm sure will not be used as a value provider.
That's called leverage,
What's that?
leverage.
Yeah, I would be happy to meet with those folks to understand why they've decided to shortfall the kids $250,000. Number one, and number two, not put the money into a building that makes up the bus stations look like they're high quality facilities. But that's just my opinion. Of course, I would not share that in a public forum.
Oh, I forgot. I was gonna shut that off.
So, yeah, someone read back the minutes, please. All right, anyway, to that end, anybody have any comments or questions? The supervisors are taken under advisement. They understand what the issue is. It's not gonna, I expect something to happen from there. Leonard mentioned that he believes he'll have to meet with the head of the commissioners in Marple Township to discuss it further. But we did our job in this case, which was to identify the issue, raise the issue, discuss the issue, bring in Action News to report on the issue, but that last part did not happen.
Let's see what happens. And
Yeah,
if
no, we
they-
did our
if-
job, so you
if-
got,
Yeah, but the job's not done yet.
Yeah.
I mean, if it gets dropped, then someone else might have to go to a township meeting and
Mhm.
keep raising it. And it's a shame that.
all the things that could have been done over the past several years with that money, easy to, there's a lot of things you could do. The fact that it hasn't been done because that money hasn't been paid and we've done our job, we've met our part of the obligation. By the way, there is a written contract between the two townships. So this is not just a gentleman's agreement or gentlewoman's agreement. This is something that is stipulated in a contract that they frankly have just decided to violate and not pay attention to. So I guess we all wish we could do that in our lives, but they just decided to do it.
Most likely because the first time it happened, we said, oh, that's okay, and then it happened the second time and we again said, don't worry about it. We've trained them.
And frankly, the guy who runs the recreation for both leisure services, both towns, Rich Enow, is a wonderful guy who accomplishes a ton. He doesn't care how much money he has. He does everything he can for the kids, which is exactly what you want. But again, that $250,000 can go a long way to do a lot of different things. And the fact that it hasn't happened, it's on us, but it's also on that committee, the joint committee between the two towns. But I think we as Newtown Township have to do something about it. It's not like we can get the money, it comes to us. That's not the point. It's just getting the money put into that joint group.
Yeah, I think the supervisors, I've had a couple conversations with them separate and apart. I think their big focus is they would like the committee, the joint committee, to take the first step
Yeah.
and request that funding because it's with them that it rests. And so they should take the first step and then we would take a second step.
Okay, public comment, no one here, anybody online? Shut-ins? Nope, okay, awesome. Any items for our next agenda?
Did we have any follow-up for the, regarding the tax parcels and the exempt properties?
Oh, the pilot?
Yeah.
Is that something, I guess that's something we'll have to put into the next,
There's no direct follow-up at this time. I will tell you it's been moved over to the solicitor.
Okay.
And I think, as you all know, Joe Catania passed away. And so Rich is picking all of that up. And so currently he's serving as their special counsel. And until they make a final decision as a board, what they're going to do, Rich is trying to cover everything, but
but it's certainly still alive.
it's on our list of things that need to be looked at. I would tell you it's probably not on the highest level of the list right at the moment.
Right, given.
Anyone else?